This is the North Carolina Essential Standards that are beginning to be used in 2012-2013. This is Science K through 8, only the force and motion strand. In kindergarten, we begin with the concept of movement, that something has a position that can then change relative to something else's position, up, down, above, below. The movement also can have a speed, and that's basically fast and slow. And it also has a pathway. The shape of the pathway, is it curved, straight, zigzag? And then the direction is which way is it going. So that's all you're really doing in kindergarten, basic concepts of movement. In first grade, now we introduce the concept of an outside force. It's probably been mentioned in kindergarten. Obviously, someone can push a toy car, someone can push a person's hand. But now we're actually looking at something that is moving without touching, and that's with the use of a magnet. We also talk about how there are different types of outside forces in terms of pushing motion and pulling motion. You can see that there is a causal arrow that is pointing back toward the pathway. So now we're going to see how that magnet can push or pull something and change its pathway. In second grade, the focus is on sound. It's sound waves, but the biggest concept is really just that you can use your body to affect something else, and it's noticeable, and we use sound as a way to notice that change. We've added strength to the kind of movement, to the traits of movement, pitch and volume, and then the ways of making something move, touching it, rubbing it, or blowing into it. The movement is actually all air. And a lot of kids don't realize that, and a lot of teachers don't realize that, to include that fact, that what we're really talking about, we're not moving the instrument unless we're hitting it like a drum. But this is a really great way to get involved with your music teacher and do some joint lesson planning. Third grade, you can see it is all about relationships. We are now relating speed one thing to another. We're seeing how the speed of the force, the outside force, affects the speed of the movement. And that also can be carried through in music, especially in learning to play the recorder, which is a very simple wind instrument. We also introduced the idea that the force specifically changes the direction of movement, separate and independent from speed and strength. Gravity, we've introduced the idea that there is a force falling to the ground. Back in kindergarten, we know that there's an invisible force from first grade of magnetism, but now we're actually going to talk about the word gravity and how it relates to movement. In fourth grade, the primary addition is electromagnetism, and specifically charged particles and how they attract and repel each other. That's the focus of the entire grade. Fifth grade, now we're starting to talk again about relations, but specifically about change. How about how something changes over time? We're going to infer that from watching things, and that can be cars on the road, planes in the sky. We're going to predict, if I push this object, what will happen. We're also going to begin graphing that, making it into something more abstract. Now, in second grade, we introduced rubbing a string, usually with a bow, to create a vibration, which creates, a movement, which creates sound. We're actually going to introduce the word friction now and see how friction changes movement over time. And also mass. We're not talking about weight. We're talking about the mass of the object. How does mass change movement over time? In 6th grade, we begin to really talk about waves in detail. In 2nd grade, we talk about sound waves, but now we're actually going to talk about the medium that they go through and how that changes the wave with the states of matter. We're using the word wavelength to talk about the electromagnetic spectrum, which I've put here as light, and then also the vibration rate, which we know from 2nd grade vaguely as frequency for pitch, but we're going to reintroduce that to have it be a little bit more scientific sounding. We're also going to talk about earthquake waves, seismic waves, and how magnitude is related to amplitude, and also when it goes through the different media that comprise the Earth itself, how that seismic wave changes. We could go into absolute position as well, because we are beginning to use coordinate graphing in mathematics, but it is not explicitly stated in the essential standards for 6th grade. In 7th grade, we then talk about variable rate and unbalanced force or balanced force, and talking about action, reaction, and now it's not just some force, it is a specific force with a specific strength moving at a specific speed, and how does that affect the rate of change of the target. More graphing, a little more complex mathematics. And in 8th grade, we add nothing in this strand. It is simply a review year for the EOD. There's probably not going to be a whole lot of time for this review, so it is very important that we stress to the kids that they really need to keep their materials from previous years and keep studying them. I know, wishful thinking. This is how it ends up. And this is all that the kids should know from K through 8 in the Force and Motion strand of the 2012 North Carolina Essential Standards for Science. My name is Sue Leone. If you have any questions, please go ahead and contact me at mrsleone@sueleone.com. And let me spell that out for you. It is MRSLEONE at SULEONE.com. Thanks very much. Happy sciencing.